Hi, John Lay here with Talented Learning to talk about advanced LMS content types and standards. Now, most LMSs can manage the basic standards, of course, of things like video or any electronic document, usually SCORM 1.2, and the standard things that you might be able to build inside an LMS, like a survey or assessment or even a VILT type class, would be standard things that basic LMSs can manage. But the advanced content types go a bit beyond that, of course, and into some lesser known and lesser used content standards that exist in the industry, and then also more specialized and expensive content media that exists in the industry. So let's start with the standards. Some advanced standards are SCORM 2004. That was the replacement for SCORM 1.2. You can even hear from the year 2004. It's been a while, but it never did catch on. Certainly some organizations use it. Still, the majority have just stuck with SCORM 1.2 that seems to meet most needs, and more LMSs support it, so you got a better chance of having your content interoperate with a broader set of learning management systems. Another one that you still see that still shows up, even though it's retired, is AICC. It's probably the oldest standard out there, but it allowed for remote content, meaning that your content didn't need to reside with your LMS server. Kind of sounds technical, but it's not. It's just that your content can reside anywhere and your LMS can point to it. And so for that reason, that standard still is prevalent in some industries, the aviation industry primarily. You'll still see AICC content, as well as organizations that try to distribute your content to a lot of organizations, but primarily xAPI has replaced that as the remote content standard. So xAPI content or experience, or the old name was Tin Can quite a few years ago for it, but that allows for remote content of any type, and it doesn't have to be formal content. It can be even informal things like reading a book or pressing a button or visiting a website. Really anything can be defined as an activity that can be stored and managed, very similar to what a CRM does with prospect and sales training information. There's also QTI and LTI standards, which are standards that were LTI used more in academia. That also allows for that remote concept idea, but that LTI content is really making a push into the corporate space, and see that in more and more LMSs now that support both, even on the corporate side. QTI is a little more specialized with a standard around questions and assessments, but certainly those LMSs that support and focus on test preparation and certification and continuing education typically will support that standard also. Augmented reality, which is when you use your devices to overlay on reality. So you saw a great example where the scientists down in the Maya were looking through an iPad, and the iPad would take the jungle away and just leave the pyramids or the Mayan architecture in the views. So they would just be looking right at it. Pokemon would be like another example, both of them non-educational examples of what augmented reality is, as opposed to virtual reality where you're submersed wearing the headgear or in some other sort of environment where you're actually practicing complicated or dangerous skills in a safe environment, like soldiers or combat or flying an airplane or other dangerous thing. Working on cranes that are 40 feet or 40 stories in the air would be examples of why you would want to use virtual reality. Some LMSs can manage that, most can't. And then finally, one that's really COVID-based now is the idea of managing virtual conferences. So there used to be their own, and there still is, a conference management sector. But because of COVID and you couldn't have conferences, many organizations, both commercial and professional associations, were left holding the bag with live conferences that needed to go virtual immediately, almost overnight. And so all LMSs, but certainly continuing education and association LMSs, are scrambling to be able to meet that need right now by extending or utilizing core LMS content capability to be able to manage an event of multiple days with sessions and tracks and collaboration and continuing education credits and things like that. So it gets complicated in a hurry when you start talking about the advanced content types and features, but that'll give you I think a good feel between what an LMS would do that you just needed to do the basics of just managing the normal types of content that you would find versus those organizations that are really kicking it up a notch with the different types of advanced content that they can support.